How's it going, everybody? Rocky Mountain EDC here, and today I have another video in the Versus series. So for this Versus episode, we have the Zero Tolerance 0562 in titanium versus the Benchmade 560 BK-1 or the Super Freek for the other knife. So these knives are going to go in a head-to-head in the Versus series, being ranked on several different categories. So those categories that they're going to be ranked on are going to be the steel type, the ergonomics, the lock type, handle material, weight of the knife, pocket carry, including the pocket clip, deployment, price, cutting and slicing, the blade shape, and then lastly, as kind of a bonus addition, the customization options that either of the knives have. So before I get into the actual video and explain a little bit about the Versus series, if you do end up liking this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, and if you are not already, subscribe to the Rocky Mountain EDC channel for more video content like this. So if you're familiar with the Versus series, I look at between company knives and within company knives. So this will actually be the first between company knife Versus series episode. So the last two videos that I've done in the Versus series have been within company. So I take knives within a company that are very similar in their purpose and overall design. So I try to give a fair fight, if you will. But this is going to be the first between companies. So different companies that are trying to make, in what I believe, a very similar knife in its purpose. So if you've watched my other videos, I explained it doesn't make sense to have a Versus series of two knives that have completely different purposes. Comparing a bushcraft knife to an elegant slip joint knife is not a comparison, right? If we want to talk about what is the best knife, well, that's subjective, right? It depends on what you need it for, right? If we want to talk about what is the best bushcraft knife, then we need to compare bushcraft knives. In this case, we're looking at these two knives that are within the EDC realm. So both of these knives, I would argue, are still within an everyday carry folding knife category. Now, what makes these knives special, the ZT0562 and the Benchmade Super Freek, is that they're kind of more on the harder use side, right? So as far as folding knives go, both of these knives are kind of touting themselves as heavy duty folders. So we're really going to be comparing it on the basis of that, a heavy duty EDC knife. None of these knives are trying to be the lightest knife or the thinnest knife or the sliciest knife. They're not trying to be a fixed blade. They're not trying to be super fancy or elegant like a slip joint. So we need to base these knives on that criteria. So sorry for rambling, had to get that kind of disclosure out of the way, but let's start going through the categories on these knives. And again, I'm going to try to be as objective as possible, but a lot of my own opinions are going to go into this. So depending on how this Versus series ends, just know that you are free to enjoy whatever knife you like better. I love both of these knives, and that's why I love doing this, because I love getting down to the nitty-gritty and seeing which one, even if it's by just a small margin, which one is the best in the Versus. I mean, this is just for fun. So when we look at, again, those categories, first up we have the steel. Now, both of these, again, like I said, they're kind of being heavy-duty EDC knives, okay? So when we talk about EDC, at least for me, I want a well-rounded steel. But these are going to be a little special in that they are trying to be heavy-duty or a little bit more robust EDC knives. So what I'm going to expect out of that, if that's the advertisement in the knife, I'm going to expect a steel that's going to represent that, right? So a little heavy duty. So I'm going to expect something that can withstand some wear, right? So it's going to withstand maybe being in tougher conditions, right? Like in wet conditions or muddy conditions. I'm going to expect it to be a tough steel to resist chipping and rolling, right? And I'm also going to expect it to still be able to maintain a decent edge. So when we look at the steel types on the ZT0562, we have CPM 20CV, and then on the Benchmade Super Freek, we have CPM M4. So made by the same steel manufacturer, right? So they're both made by Crucible, but they're going to be a little different, right? So M4 is going to tout very good toughness and very good edge retention. CPM 20CV, great edge retention and great corrosion resistance, but a little lacking on the toughness and the ease of sharpening. So when we look at both of these knives in terms of ease of sharpening, they're going to be about the same, roughly. Okay, so they're going to be about the same on the ease of sharpening. In terms of toughness, M4 is probably going to take the cake on the toughness category. As far as edge retention, that's going to be a tough one. I think that they're very similar in edge retention. Both of them have great edge retention, but is that toughness going to change a little bit of how that edge retention lasts? As far as corrosion resistance, CPM 20CV is going to take the cake on corrosion resistance. M4, part of the reason why the blade is coated is because it is very poor in corrosion resistance. So this is really a kind of a tough battle because we have different properties, different things that we want from both of these knives. But when it comes to, in my mind, a heavy-duty steel for a heavy-duty EDC, I'm going to have to go with the M4. I'm going to have to say that Benchmade Super Freek wins on that category because it has that good edge retention. It has superior toughness, so if I had to push this knife to its paces, I'm not going to be worried as much about it rolling or chipping. And because they do offer it coated, I'm not too concerned about the corroding, and I know as a responsible knife user, I'm going to take care and clean off my blade. So I think in terms of that toughness category, I'm going to give the win for the steel to the Benchmade Freek. Okay. Next up, we have the ergonomics. Now, both of these knives have excellent ergonomics. So they're going to be very kind of neutral, but specific at the same time. You'll hear me talk about that a lot. They're going to be specific enough to where you have enough swelling and enough kind of cutouts for specific things, like your thumb and your index finger are perhaps, to me, one of the most important. A good placement for the thumb and a good placement for the index finger make you feel a lot more comfortable. And both of these knives do that really well. They give a slight ramp, which I appreciate, not an over-exaggerated ramp for the thumb. Slight ramp with some jimping, not too aggressive, but just there enough just to give you a little bit of that purchase. They both have very similar lines in terms of their ergonomics here, so they're gonna have a really good placement for that index finger. And the rest of it's kind of up to preference, but I don't want to be forced into a certain position, and I also don't want it to feel like I'm holding on to a rectangular piece of wood, right? I don't want it to be sharp. I need to have contoured edges. I want it to be neutral enough that if I needed to change positions, right? But specific enough that it's comfortable in the hand if I need to use it for long periods of time. So that's really hard. And both of these do that first part really well. We have, a few extra little kind of cutouts here on the 0562, where the Benchmade Super Freek kind of goes with a more neutral approach towards the butt end. They both offer some good kind of ending points down here that if your pinky doesn't fit, or if you have a large hand or a gloved hand, you have a little extra purchase space to choke down but still get a grip on the knife. So that's really important. For me, this is going to come down to really the contouring and the thickness of the handles on the knife. So how thick is it? And again, typically something that is a little more swelled at certain areas, especially in the palm, is going to offer a little bit more comfort in the hand. And this is a tough one. They both have a very kind of thick handle, which I appreciate because it makes it comfortable. But I would say that the Benchmade Super Freak just offers a little bit more of that that swelling in the hand. So it actually just kind of fits. It just feels comfortable in the hand. It just feels natural. It feels good. It's contoured. It has enough swelling in the palm that it just fits there really nice. Again, 0562, great. It's just a little bit more blocky, and it's pretty much a straight piece of that titanium in the handle there. Not much swelling going out the palm, where if we look at the Freek, we can see kind of how it swells out towards that middle portion where the palm's going. It kind of has a gradual slope, and that's really nice. And that little difference does make a difference when we look at the ergonomics. So I'm going to give the ergonomics to the Benchmade Super Freak. Next up, we have a lock type, and this one's kind of hard because, again, heavy duty EDC, we need an easy to manipulate lock. When you're doing everyday carry, you're using it, perhaps more often, less often, but you need a lock that's easy to manipulate. And both of these knives are pretty easy to manipulate, at least in terms of the lock. I would say the axis lock is a little bit more easy to manipulate than a frame lock. And again, this is one of those things where as the more you use it, as the more you carry it, the easier it is going to be to manipulate that frame lock. Axis lock, it's just a great, easy to use lock. I mean, I can hand this knife to anyone, especially non-knife people, and they somehow just figure it out pretty easily that that is the lock, and they don't have a problem with it. I've had people with this one trying to push the frame on the inside, trying to unlock it, which is not good and kind of scary. So that's kind of important. And I would say in terms of ease of manipulation, the Benchmade Super Freak is going to take that. Now, the next thing we have to think about for the lock is how tough it is, and this is going to be subjective. I'm not doing a toughness test. I'm not going to take these knives out. I'm not going to go beat on them for this particular versus. Both of these lock types, the axis lock and the frame lock, are very strong locks. When they are locked into place and they're not having some type of manufacturing error or user error, so when you're not being an idiot with your knife and doing something you shouldn't, right? We're talking about knife things that we're using with our knives. When they're functioning properly and being used properly, both of these locks are going to be extremely strong for a folding knife. Now, there's one main thing that I'm going to argue on this one. The axis lock is arguably a better design when we think about this crossbar coming over and stopping that tang of the blade from closing, right? Versus a frame lock, it's a piece of metal that's sliding out and joining in with the tang of the blade to prevent that from going. Here's the problem. And I know this varies based upon individual, but I have had more Omega springs break than I would like to, especially with the Freek. I've already had to replace the Omega springs on this. I've already had to replace the Omega springs on my Benchmade bug out. Haven't had to on the 940, but when those Omega springs break, this knife is pretty much useless. So we're relying on the function of this knife on a very thin, very precise piece of metal, this spring. Right? And I'm not saying that the spring itself, obviously when it's engaged, the spring doesn't do anything. It's just hanging out until you need it to close to put that tension on it, right? But that is an annoying thing. This knife can go from being one of the strongest, toughest knives, but when that Omega spring breaks, it's pretty much useless. You get one break, it can still function, but it's kind of, I don't know. You get both of them break, now you gotta either send it into Benchmade or you need to order some aftermarket Omega springs. So for me, because of that small thing, such a great lock, it's kind of a live by the sword, die by the sword kind of thing. It lives by the Omega springs and dies by the Omega springs. And because of that, I just have a harder time feeling a little bit more reliable with that. So I'm going to give the win in terms of that lock type to the ZT0562. So the 0562 in titanium is going to win that Loctite. Now let's talk about handle material. So again, when we talk about EDC, handle material is going to vary. It's going to really depend on your preference. But I mean, you're going to want something that is fairly light, and we'll kind of get into weight in a little bit right after handle material. You're going to kind of want something light, something easy to grip, nothing too aggressive, right? We're not using these in tactical situations, okay? We're talking about heavy-duty EDC knives, so that heavy-duty part's going to play into it, but we want something a little well-rounded. It's light, it's easy to grip, and it's just comfortable to hold to a degree, right? And for this, we have the G10 on the Benchmade Super Freek, and we have full titanium on the 0562. Now, both of these materials are going to be extremely strong. As far as grippiness, this is going to have a smooth texture. The 0562 is not a very grippy handle material. It is a little slick, so keep that in mind. Now, as far as Benchmade's G10, they do not have the most grippy G10, but comparing it to the titanium, it is a little bit more grippy. So it is going to feel, a little bit more secure in the hand. Again, those ergonomics of the knife are going to help as well. And again, 0562 has great ergonomics. That also kind of helps counterbalance the fact that it's a slippery handle material. And we kind of want to think of something that, if it gets wet, is it going to corrode? Is it going to have issues? Either if these get wet, no, they're fine. Titanium doesn't really corrode, okay? It doesn't corrode like steel. G10, it's obviously going to be a type of composite material, but when it gets wet, it's going to be fine. And really, if it gets subjected to any other type of chemicals, they're going to be fine. So this is really preference based, but when we get into the weight category, and I'm going to kind of do these weight and handle material kind of at the same time here, it really comes down to how does it make the knife feel. And I would say that the ZT0562, even though they do have milling that helps keep this lighter, it is heavier, but I would say it's a better balanced knife. It feels better in hand in terms of the weight and the balance, where this is lighter in hand due to that G10 and partial liners in there, but it's kind of difficult. And for me, I have a preference here. It's really going to be the titanium. It helps balance it out. As we get into the weight category here, the ZT0562 is going to be heavier, but it just feels better. And it's not heavier by a margin that I think makes the knives function differently. This isn't like a brick. It's heavier, but it's not a brick. This, for me, although comfortable and the great handle material, great ergonomics and everything, but it's just a little too blade heavy for me. It wants to, kind of that fulcrum point kind of is a little higher up towards the blade. So for me, that handle material is just going to feel better and just kind of work better with the knife on the ZT0562. And that brings us to weight. So kind of with that, right? The Benchmade Super Freek comes in about 4.3 ounces, and the ZT0562 comes in about 5.4 ounces. So the ZT is going to be about 1 ounce, like 1.15 ounces greater, okay? And that can make a difference and not make a difference. But these are heavy-duty knives, right? These are heavy-duty EDC knives. And I don't think that when we go to buy a heavy-duty EDC knife that we're expecting it to be the lightest in the bunch, right? Now, this does feel good. You get a lot of knife, a lot of blade for the size. But again, like I said, with that titanium handle material, the weight of this just makes it feel more balanced. It just feels balanced in my hand. It wants to sit in my hand, right at that fulcrum point, right where I like it, at the index finger. This kind of feels like it wants to fall out of my hand where the blade is. Now it's comfortable, but when I grip down, it just kind of feels like it wants to fall down, fall forward, due to that lighter material. And I don't think that 1 ounce really makes a big difference. Maybe if you're wearing athletic shorts, but if I'm going to wear athletic shorts, I'm not taking a heavy duty knife with me. If I was and I had to, I would take the Super Freek. But as far as that goes, I'm going to give the weight category to the ZT0562 because it just feels a little bit more intended to the knife, and it actually just goes well. Pocket clip, pocket carry, very similar knives in that regard. Now, the ZT0562 is going to come with a deep carry pocket clip, which helps tremendously if you want easy carrying in the pocket. And it is easy to get out of the pocket. I know the argument of having a traditional pocket clip and having this stick out, it's something to grab onto to pull out of your pocket. But because of this being a slicker metal material, I prefer it to sit deeper because it is a little slicker, but it also makes it very easy to get out of the pocket. As far as the width, yeah, you have that flipper tab sticking off, so in terms of in your pocket, other than the flipper tab, they're going to be very similar in terms of what they take up in your pocket, okay? But as far as that pocket carry and pocket clip, I'm going to have to give it to the ZT0562. I like deep carry pocket clips. Nothing wrong with this one, but I don't really enjoy this extra chunk sitting out of my pocket. Unless it's something really skinny like the Benchmade 940, I don't prefer that. So I'm going to give the win on that to the ZT0562. Okay. All right, let's talk about deployment in terms of its feel and the options. Okay, so Benchmade 940, we have the axis lock and the thumb studs. Lots of different deployments. We can use the thumb, we can slow roll it, we can flick it out with our thumb, we can reverse flick, spidey flick. We can use the axis lock itself. Without getting too in the weeds here, I think the deployment options here are pretty obvious that the Benchmade Super Freek has the better deployment options. And I'm going to get into why, because this ZT0562 has the flipper tab. External stop pins are not thumb studs. So you really only have one form of deployment. Now the D10 is just right, and the flipper is comfortable enough that it has a very good action, but you only have one form of deployment. This is not a viable form. That just hurts your thumb. So deployment ease, this is easy to deploy no matter what I do. It's easy to deploy. I have many options. I'm going to give the win to the Benchmade Super Freek. All right, next category is going to be price. So the pricing. This is really kind of price for materials versus the value of the knife. So the ZT0562 MSRP is going to come in at about $390. At retail price, it's about $312. Benchmade Super Freek is going to be an MSRP of $280 and a retail price of about $252. Now, both of these knives feature good materials, good blade steels. G10 is nothing to laugh at. Just because it has titanium doesn't immediately make it a better knife. It is going to be more expensive to machine and process, but they do have very nice G10 on here. So there is a lot that goes into the Benchmade Super Freek. Now, this is really preference based. As far as the better heavy-duty folder for the price and what you get, for once, Benchmade actually prices this very reasonably. The Benchmade Super Freek might be one of the best priced knives that Benchmade sells. And I'm going to give the win to the Benchmade Super Freek on that price because it's really not that bad. And in terms of a budget for a good heavy-duty knife, that's a good option. So in terms of price, I'm going to give the win to the Benchmade Super Freek. All right, cutting and slicing. Both of these knives are going to have pretty comparable cutting geometry in terms of the blade style, blade shape. So they're both going to have a drop point style blade. They're going to have a flat portion along with a slight belly and then that gradual drop. So that's very nice, very easy to compare in that regard, similar blade shape. The sliciness is really going to come down to the thinness. And as we can see, the ZT0562 is thicker behind the edge, which helps it in terms of its toughness, right? So you could argue that kind of helps come in to accommodate for the 20 CV lack of toughness. But the M4 blade steel, it can be thin and slicey, but also very strong. So we kind of always have to think about the playoff there. And I think in terms of cutting and slicing, yes, they're both going to cut through standard materials very easily. But as far as sliciness, the Benchmade Super Freek is going to take the win on the slicey realm. So I'm going to give the win to the Benchmade Super Freek. Blade shape, like I said, they both have drop point style blade shapes. I think they both look really good. So this is honestly just going to be a tie for the blade shape. And then lastly, customization. They're going to be very similar in their customization options. There's very limited customizations for both of these. So there might be some aftermarket scales for the Benchmade Super Freek, and I don't know of any, from what I've seen, I don't know of any aftermarket scales for the ZT0562. What you can change is you can change the hardware on the 0562, possibly a pocket clip. And with the Benchmade Super Freek, yeah, you can get new hardware, you can customize the axis lock, you can get a new thumb stud. But that's about all I know. In terms of, yes, you can customize pocket clips. So really these are both comparable in their realm of customization. So I'm going to give these both a tie. Okay, so that is it for our categories. So we're going to tally these up and see, based upon those comparisons, which one wins. So the winner is the Benchmade Super Freek by 1 point. So the Benchmade Super Freek got a 7, where the ZT0562 got a total of 6. And very good knives, both of them. Just slight, small details make a difference. And I think both of these knives are great. I think they're both great heavy-duty EDC pocket knives. I love them both. I have a bias in terms of which one I actually like better based upon preferences, but when we just talk about the comparisons in the Versus series, the Benchmade Super Freek is going to take the cake by 1 point. So I appreciate you guys watching. This is a longer video. I do appreciate if you stuck through all the way. But again, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like. And if you are not already, subscribe to the Rocky Mountain EDC channel. Thanks.